Cleopatra's universe lasted only 39 years. She reigned as Queen of Egypt for over half that time. After all these years, Cleopatra, like the distant stars, eludes us. It seems all people want to know is, what did she look like? Coins featuring Cleopatra's portrait might give us a glimpse of the last queen of Egypt. Notice her exaggerated nose. Does ancient coin technology prevent us from seeing a true likeness? Or maybe the coins were designed to make her look like Alexander the Great, the Macedonian Greek conqueror of Egypt and Cleopatra's esteemed predecessor. Some scholars believe this bust from ancient Rome is the face of Cleopatra. Others disagree. Regardless, it does paint a more attractive face than the coins. Historians agree this stone sculpture is definitely Cleopatra. She is shown as a typical stylized pharaoh, and no facial features are recognizable. Cleopatra never kept a diary. Most of her biographies were written by her enemy, the Romans. Plutarch made her into an irresistible queen whose sorcerous power could cast spells. Centuries later, Plutarch's work influenced one of the world's greatest writers, William Shakespeare. Some say his play, Antony and Cleopatra, made her look melodramatic instead of the capable, calculating ruler of a large country. Numerous portraits of the legendary Cleopatra appeared as the Renaissance grew in Europe. Paintings gave her various looks, some gorgeous, others less favorable. Then soon after the 20th century dawned, the movies arrived. Elizabeth Taylor in 1963 being the most famous and popular. Taylor made Cleopatra voluptuous. Recently, numerous books insist we take a new view of Cleopatra's short life. Of course, the final book on the last queen of Egypt will never be written. Today, researchers are patiently studying remnants and relics from Cleopatra's time. The new evidence allows us to see beyond the pop culture that has engulfed her life. It is time to head back to the world of Cleopatra. We imagine Cleopatra in her luxurious palace. She rules a vast and great land. Alexandria, Egypt, 2,000 years ago, is a bustling modern place, the New York City of its day, a melting pot. People from all over the Middle East live and work here. She is queen and pharaoh, president and CEO. She is shrewd in her power, and she intends to keep it. Cleopatra governs Egypt, but she is of Macedonian, Greek descent. Alexander the Great had founded this port city on the Mediterranean Sea some 300 years prior. Alexander came from Macedonia, located north of Athens. His ambitions led him and Greek culture across the Middle East, down to Egypt, and even to remote lands farther east. Greek gods and science influenced cultures throughout this world, especially in Cleopatra's Alexandria. Ancient Greece emerged culturally in the 8th century BC, with great books such as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The magnificent Parthenon was built after a successful defense of their homeland against the Persians in the 5th century BC. Dedicated to the Greek goddess Athena, this temple is a tribute to her power and influence. Olympian gods are shown in the many paintings and sculptures that adorn this stunning creation of marble. Inside, we find a gold and ivory statue of Athena. Born from the head of Zeus, the divine virgin Athena represents such worthy human attributes as justice, wisdom, and inspiration. Though Greece sprouted such illustrious intellectuals as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and planted the seeds of democracy and theater, we need to be reminded that all was not perfect. Early Greeks implemented slavery and conducted many internal wars against each other. In Cleopatra's time, the Parthenon and Greece itself were ruled by Rome. She visited here in the summer of 32 BC with her ally and Roman lover, Mark Antony. The Athenians of the time embraced the couple, placing statues here. Later, it was said, the figures were struck by lightning. This may be a myth, a story invented by the Roman Emperor Octavian, the eventual victor over Antony and Cleopatra. Back in her palace, Cleopatra's constant concern is Rome. We picture her studying maps, growing wary of Rome's ambitions. She knows their leaders can be both friend and foe at the same time. Rome's expansion started small, but it soon spread to neighboring lands. Rome's initial quests were to conquer kings and monarchs who they thought inferior to their new republic. Egypt became embroiled in this expansion. Cleopatra would eventually succumb to the Romans in 30 BC as the Roman Republic changed into the Roman Empire. After conquering Greece, the Romans borrowed much from their culture, including architecture. Around 50 BC, just as Cleopatra became Queen of Egypt, Rome dedicated this magnificent structure, the Theater of Pompey. This opulent theater and temple was one of their first great structures. This Roman goddess is Venus Victrix, borrowed from an armed version of the Greek Aphrodite, who borrowed it from the Babylonian goddess and warrior Ishtar. Cleopatra rose to power when Julius Caesar led Rome. Their love affair is legendary. Their union produced a son named Caesarion. We do not know who seduced whom. Maybe it was mutual, a meeting of hearts and minds. It was here on March 15, 44 BC, in a curia near the theater, that Caesar's lust for kingship and power led to his brutal assassination. Cleopatra's lover and protector was gone.
3 hands for me! Et tu, brute.
Cleopatra continues on without Caesar. Her duties are numerous and sometimes mundane. She approves a document, agreeing to exchange grain for wine. Her actual handwriting may survive today. She simply wrote, "Let it be done." In Rome, Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted general, agrees to share power with Caesar's nephew and heir, Octavian. Fate and circumstance eventually lead Cleopatra to Mark Antony, as we will explore later. Just before the Nile River branches into its delta near present-day Cairo, we find Egypt's most spectacular site, the pyramids of Giza. The Great Sphinx, a mythical creature combining a lion's body with an Egyptian head, was built 4,500 years ago by the pharaoh Khafra. It is the world's largest monolithic statue, standing nearly 70 feet tall. The largest pyramid, known as the Pyramid of Khufu or Cheops, for it was built as his tomb, is the largest and oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one to remain largely intact. It stands almost 500 feet tall. Cleopatra and Caesar took a magnificent cruise down the Nile River. There is no doubt the young Egyptian queen showcased many Egyptian treasures. The Great Library of Alexandria was founded by Cleopatra's ancestors over 200 years before she came to power. We can envision 2 scholars debating whether the Earth really did move around the sun based on recent writings from a Greek named Aristarchus. Alexandria was a city that thirsted for knowledge. When ships came into port, any scrolls found on board had to be copied before the ship could leave again. Cleopatra was raised in royalty, like growing up in the White House. Ceremonies and festivals were a common part of her life. She was sure to learn eloquence and posture. She had private tutors and knew 9 or 10 languages. She was the first Greek ruler to learn the Egyptian language. Cleopatra must have marveled at this magnificent center of learning and its accompanying museum. The Great Library of Alexandria was thought to hold over 500,000 scrolls. Maybe one day, scholars told a young Cleopatra of a papyrus book written by Eratosthenes, a former director of this library, that spoke of a large Earth, one much bigger than anyone had previously thought. She looks for the scroll, wanting to know more about this curious discovery. Eratosthenes was the Einstein of his day. He cleverly learned the true size of the Earth by observing shadows. In Syene, temple pillars did not cast a shadow when the sun was at midday on the longest day of the year. Likewise, when the sun was directly overhead, its light shone straight down to the bottom of a well. By itself, this news is not earth-shattering, but Eratosthenes was an explorer. He wondered if, on the same day, at the same time, a pillar would cast a shadow in Alexandria, far north of Syene. His answer? Sticks cast a definite shadow. This meant the Earth's surface was curved. A flat planet would mean sticks at both places would leave no shadows. Eratosthenes knew the shadow angle in Alexandria was 7 degrees, or 1/50th of a 360-degree circle. So now all he needed to know was the distance from Alexandria to Syene. It had to be a long camel ride. It was 500 miles. Multiply that by 50, and you get 25,000 miles, very close to the true circumference of the Earth. A young Cleopatra must have been impressed. Here at the Great Temple of Hathor in Dendera is another example of Egyptian astronomy. We enter a small room, a chapel dedicated to Osiris. Above, we see a wondrous celestial ceiling, the Dendera zodiac. We find familiar constellations such as Taurus the bull, Libra the scales, and Pisces the fish. The sun, moon, and stars would literally be the home for Cleopatra's Egyptian gods. From her palace in the Alexandria harbor, Cleopatra would have gazed upon one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the towering Pharos Lighthouse. Over 40 stories tall, it is the world's first skyscraper. The imposing lighthouse helped guide ships to this major commercial center, especially helpful if sailing conditions were dangerous. A statue of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, graced the top of the tower. Its giant mirror reflected sunlight during the day, while fire was used at night. Its mirror may have also been used as a telescope to spot distant ships. Earthquakes, time, and neglect contributed to the demise of the Pharos Lighthouse, until finally a strong 14th century earthquake toppled the mighty structure. Underneath the waters near Alexandria lie not only stones from the Great Lighthouse, but recently discovered relics that have astonished the world and helped historians better understand Egypt and Cleopatra's world. The face on this sphinx, with both Greek and Egyptian features, may be a royal statue of Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII. Like his daughter, Ptolemy had to deal with the increasing power of Rome, often paying bribes for protection or to keep Rome from invading. head of Serapis, a god combining Greek and Egyptian elements, is found here in Canopus, an ancient city that is now completely underwater. Serapis was a god of agriculture and fertility. Close to Canopus lies another underwater city, Heraklion, a sacred location where pharaohs were crowned, maybe even Cleopatra. During her coronation, she may have walked between these two colossal statues of a Ptolemaic king and queen. The discovery of these underwater relics brings to life the events of Cleopatra's reign. They shed light on the sometimes murky ancient queen. Cleopatra ruled Egypt as queen and pharaoh for 21 years, yet Rome was always close by. During her reign, she continued to work here at the great Temple of Hathor in Dendera. Hathor was the Egyptian goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. After Caesar's death, recall that Cleopatra and Roman leader Mark Antony became entwined. Like her relationship with Caesar, we're not sure exactly what happened or exactly how the love affair started. We know only that Rome's other leader, Octavian, despised Cleopatra, especially her son by Caesar. Here we see Cleopatra and Caesarion etched into the temple walls. It shows them in an offering to Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Hathor, the supreme gods of Egypt. As time marched forward, it was becoming clearer only one leader could rule the Roman Empire. War was declared by Octavian. It came down to a crucial battle at Actium, on the coast of Greece. Octavian let Antony and Cleopatra's ships attack first. He fought them lightly and let them slip through. Antony and Cleopatra found themselves cut off. Marooned, they headed back to Alexandria. Back at her palace, Cleopatra knows Octavian is closing in. She gives an order to send Caesarion to safety in hopes of joining him later. Unfortunately, her son never made it. Knowing the end is near, she prays to the goddess Isis. Cleopatra sees herself as Isis, divine and immortal, following the long tradition of Egyptian pharaohs. Much is written that Mark Antony dies in her arms after stabbing himself, and then Cleopatra dies of a self-inflicted bite from an asp, a poisonous snake. Today, we know Cleopatra much better. We're aware of her intelligence and her leadership as ruler and queen of Egypt. Still, Cleopatra continues to elude us. Her universe remains an enticing mystery.